sometimes things that you can't see or don't know. It's so small when you're earlier in life or in your early 20s, you don't know it. Maybe it's there, or maybe you just can't see it. But by the time you get to your 30s, things grow up to where
you can see them.
You kind of see them.
You can see them. And honestly, that's not necessarily always a bad thing.
I don't think it is a bad thing.
I don't think it is. If you're looking for it, it could be a really, really helpful thing.
I think what we're trying to say is there's an invitation in our 30s to deal with things that, it would have been awesome if we dealt with them sooner, but maybe we couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Maybe we had no reason to see it.
And that's huge, because don't you think that like every stage of life has an invitation?
I would hope.
You're listening to the Ferment Podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. This special edition of the podcast is entitled So You've Turned 35, featuring a candid and helpful conversation between Adam and Heather Russell about this overlooked stage of life. This episode is brought to you by Monk Drums. Monk Drums is a creative desert venture that strives to combine beauty and business as one heartbeat. Monk Drums' main focus is handcrafted wooden drums that allow us to love, assist, and serve all who accompany us on this path. Use the coupon code FERMENTPOD to get 5% off your Monk Drums order. Find them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Monk Drums. And every Monday, look for hashtag Monk Drum Monday. Speaking from personal experience, monk drums are wonderfully crafted and they sound amazing. They blend the best traits of both the djembe and the cajon, and I found them to be incredibly versatile in both the live and studio environment. Check them out at monkdrums.com.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media, Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Today's episode of the Ferment Podcast is brought to you by Hardin Coffee, a small batch custom roaster located in the rolling green hills of Kentucky. At Hardin, we believe in locating world-class coffee from around the globe and delivering it to your door fresh and roasted to perfection. We specialize in single origin coffees as well as seasonal blends. Coffee is communal, coffee is culinary, coffee is art. Visit us today at hardincoffee.com.
Hey, Heather.
Hey, Adam.
That's right. I'm sharing this episode not with a friend.
What? Thanks a lot.
No, you know what I mean. Someone who's more than a friend.
Oh, there we go. What up, everybody?
That's my wife, Heather.
Hi.
Yes, we are doing our first tandem ferment episode.
Tandem ferment.
We're sitting at our kitchen table.
We are.
There are no children here.
It's a miracle.
The dog is not being annoying.
I don't know what's happening.
Neither do I.
The Lord is surely among us.
Clearly. Hey, here's what I want to do. We've been talking about this for a while, but we want to talk about this with you guys. And so the title of today's episode is So You Turned 35.
That's right.
That's right. Maybe I should explain a little bit about what we're talking about. This is something Heather and I've noticed a little bit, and I've given it the title, So You've Turned 35, but it's not exactly 35, right?
Right. We want to talk a little bit about a life stage, a stage in life that maybe doesn't get the attention that some other life stages get.
And it needs attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's do life stages here for a minute.
Sure.
People are born.
Yes, most of them are.
People are born. And we sort of universally recognize that that's a big deal.
Right.
People realize that when someone has a baby, we make a big deal about it. We have showers, we celebrate them, we take them gifts, all that kind of thing.
Right. And then shortly after they're born, they are weaned.
Yeah.
A couple years. And that doesn't necessarily just have to be, at a certain time, but it marks the point at which they start gaining independence from their mother.
Yeah. And then the next stage is like kindergarten, right?
Right. Where they start interacting with peers, people their own age.
And they go away from their mothers.
Right.
They go to a school. Mm-hmm. And then I think we also recognize that graduation is a big deal. And maybe before graduation, adolescence.
I think adolescence is probably the life stage that gets the most attention, that we're really aware of and careful to attend to people's emotional needs during that time.
Yeah, and people are awkward.
Yeah. And some of them grow out of it.
Solid burn. Yeah. So we realized that like when you're in middle school, life is hard.
Right.
You have hormones showing up.
And there's so much grace given to kids at that age.
And I know people are like, what are we talking about right now?
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting there. So there's adolescence and then there's graduation, both from high school and college. And we realize those are big deals. People have parties, they give money, there's ceremonies, there's all these things. But then something happens. And it's basically, from my pastoral experience, we just sort of like go quiet on people, don't we?
Right. And so it's like after they get out of college and they quote unquote start their life, we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that next really important phase until maybe they are older and maybe they become grandparents or retire. But there's a big chunk in there that is really vital to pay attention to.
Yeah. And this is something that Heather and I've just noticed pastorally as we walk with people through their lives. We've just noticed that like major stuff happens in people's mid-30s.
Right. And really what kicked it off for us is we've seen a lot of really terrible things happen.
Yeah, trauma.
And people really fall into hard times that seem unnecessary.
Yeah. What we've noticed is people get drinking problems.
Right.
Or people get divorced.
Or they get depressed. Or they have some sort of crisis of faith or crisis of identity.
Yeah, they really take ownership, or they begin to question their faith in a new way. And, this is clearly not universal.
No.
But we've noticed that a lot of it is in people's mid-30s.
And we're both trained therapists. No,
that
wait.
is incorrect.
That is incorrect.
Yeah.
Disclaimer.
That is a disclaimer here. I think we just should say that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist. Heather's not a PhD. I've done literally no research in life development.
So everything we're talking about today is strictly observational and pastoral in nature.
But I think it might be helpful.
I think so.
I think people's life gets real in their mid-30s in a brand new way.
Absolutely.
I think that's what we're trying to say, right?
I think it is.
Okay. So I thought after we've sort of like, I guess, explained a little bit about what we wanted to talk about today, I thought maybe we could take a few minutes, Heather, and we could talk about why we think this happens. And then maybe what are a few very practical ways people could approach this season in life?
Right. So I think it's pretty much a given that we all agree that life is always hard at some level. Like when you're in college, you think it's super hard and you're stressed out. When
you're studying all the time.
Yeah. And when you are first starting out at any job or any new transition, it's hard. But there's something about getting to maybe some point in your 30s where you've been at something for a while that brings a new level of difficulty.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that kind of feed into this are jobs. Like by the time you're in your mid-30s, you've been at a job probably for a little while.
Yeah, it's probably not entry level anymore.
Probably, unless you're starting something new but for the most part, these are general statements, but still, you've probably been at something for a while, or at least, even if you're new at something, you're older.
Yeah.
And you have a little more experience. You probably have some kids.
Yeah, you might have a spouse, you might have some kids.
If you have a family, you've probably incurred some bills, maybe some student loans, maybe a mortgage.
Yeah. Really what I'm hearing you say is there's something about our 30s that sort of absorbs our margin.
Yeah, you start carrying a level of responsibility in which you have to let go of some of that me time that maybe you enjoyed in your 20s or in your teens. And your time becomes a little bit more about things that you're responsible for, things or people.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know this past fall, we have 4 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know this past fall, all 4 of our kids were playing soccer.
Which was super easy.
Yeah. How many nights a week were we at the soccer field?
All 8?
Yeah. No, I actually think there was a brief moment where we were at the soccer field 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. It was pretty intense.
And I love going to the soccer.
I love it. I love watching the kids, but it soaked up every ounce of our spare time.
Yeah, everything was gone. And this is on top of pastoring the church, helping giving direction to Vineyard Worship. You own your own art studio for children. And one of the things that we noticed even this fall was our schedules were just amped, weren't
Yeah,
they?
and this wasn't necessarily reality when our kids were small. So even
No.
when we were younger and our kids were small, they took a lot of energy, but they didn't have their own schedules.
Yeah.
So this whole kids having their own lives and schedules thing has impacted us in a new way.
Yeah. And so our schedules were like super amped, but none of the other things in our life took a break.
Right.
Yeah. So we were still on. And so I think that's part of what we're saying is there's something about this stage in life where whatever margins you had earlier, they just sort of go away. And there's a sense in which all of those really good yeses that you gave to other people or to a job, a career, to God,
Yeah.
those 3 or 4 yeses, and I'm thinking about being married, having children, starting a career, maybe locating, buying a house. It's
Pouring into people, even if you're in any sort of ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 6. You could give yourself to 6 yeses, and then all of a sudden your life is kind of
Full.
completely full.
And I think it's important to point out that none of these are bad things.
No, it's all good. I guess all I'm trying to say in that is you could make 6 or 7 really important decisions and they be really good and not realize that the ramifications are that in 6 or 8 or 10 years, it's going to completely fill your life.
Yeah. And I'm super guilty of saying yes way too easily to everything because I didn't realize for many years how valuable margins were.
Yeah, I mean, when you have no margin, it's really hard to deal with anything extra that comes. And life always has a way of stacking something extra, right?
Right. Like a car breaks down or there's a leak in the basement.
And so I think one of the things that would be really good for us to be aware of, if you're listening to us wherever you're at right now, is this idea that maybe some of what you're experiencing, maybe we're naming it for you right now. And here's some of the reasons why. Like maybe the devil's not attacking you. Or I mean, maybe he is.
Probably.
Probably. But maybe what's really happening also is you've just ended up with a life where you have no margin.
Right. But don't you find that when you start feeling squeezed and when your time starts feeling so spoken for that it can feel like you're being attacked?
Of course. It gets very claustrophobic. And things that are blessings like mates and children and
jobs
and soccer
mission,
and ministry
yeah.
and starting your own business, all those things, those are all blessings. All of a sudden, they don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you turn 35. One of the things that's probably going to happen to you is your margins are going to get way, way, way thinner.
Right.
You want to add anything else to that?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Let's move on here. Second reason why I think this happened is something I'm calling trajectory. Meaning that by the time we get into our 30s, especially mid 30s, I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of the little ways in which our soul has been formed, or to sort of piggyback off of what we were talking about earlier with margins, a lot of the seemingly small decisions we've made, or maybe in this category, the small decisions we didn't make. By the time we get into our 30s, we've had enough time for those things to grow. And all of a sudden, maybe we accidentally became a person that we didn't intend on being.
Right. It's kind of like your baby cobra analogy.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes when I'm talking to my church, I talk about baby cobras. I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes we put up with things when they're small because they seem insignificant, right? And if we had dealt with it when it was small, it'd be relatively easy to deal with, even if it's dangerous, like a baby cobra.
Right.
But if it's undealt with, give it enough time, that baby cobra becomes a giant cobra. Or give it enough time, the trajectory of our inactivity or our activity, it has time to go somewhere. And so even if we're off only by 1 degree.
Yeah, 1 degree when you're 19, taken to the age of 35, suddenly has a much broader scope.
Yeah. So like a 19-year-old who has a slight anger issue, maybe people give them a pass because they're a young person, right? But if it's undealt with and that baby cobra grows until that person is 35, then all of a sudden it's possible for me to become the kind of person who doesn't have a baby cobra of anger. Now I have an 8-foot long cobra of anger living in my life, right?
And wouldn't you say that baby cobras are probably easier to deal with
Of course they
than
are.
mama cobras?
Yeah, absolutely. It's easier to handle something when it's small. So I think there's something about our 30s or this season in life where a lot of the things that we either grew up with, maybe life experience, the dysfunction at our home, or just I oftentimes think about quote unquote cuteness. Things that were cute when a kid was 8, or things that were cute when a kid is in high school, or things we give people passes for, or things we don't really hold ourselves accountable for. Maybe when we get to be 35, it's a disaster.
And also, it's kind of the time when, even if it's things that you haven't chosen, but rather things that you have had instilled in you or grew up with or kind of took on through osmosis from your home, it's had enough time to cultivate in your own life and maybe show up in the home that you've now created.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just be honest here. Like, I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about anything, you know? And so I grew up with the baby cobra of really about avoiding. Now, what's interesting is I'm not an avoider, but I am at home, right?
It's kind of funny. We've been talking about that.
Yeah. I'm owning it.
Look at you.
I'll own it.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's weird how sometimes things that you can't see or don't know, it's so small when you're earlier in life or in your early 20s, you don't know it. Maybe it's there, or maybe you just can't see it. But by the time you get to your 30s, things grow up to where
you can see them.
You kind of see them.
You can see them. And honestly, that's not necessarily always a bad thing.
I don't think it is a bad thing.
I don't think it is. If you're looking for it, it could be a really, really helpful thing.
I think this is actually, I think what we're trying to say is there's an invitation in our 30s to deal with things that, it would have been awesome if we dealt with them sooner, but maybe we couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Maybe we had no reason to see it.
And that's huge, because don't you think that like every stage of life has an invitation?
I would hope.
To growth.
We're gonna frame it as invitation.
Let's talk. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think invitation is a better way to think about that.
Yeah.
So if this is sort of like hitting home a little bit and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me. Yeah, I don't think it would be helpful to think this in terms of condemnation.
Right.
But invitation.
Right.
It's perfect.
I mean, maybe if you've made the choice in your when you were 19 or 20 to go to Taco Bell twice a day, every day, by the time
what's the matter with Taco Bell?
Well, nothing's necessarily the matter with Taco Bell.
Why are you beating up on Taco Bell?
Maybe that decision by the time you're 30 would be like a really bad thing.
If you went to Taco Bell every day,
twice a day,
you're dead.
So we have got a couple different things growing. We've got things that, maybe have been our choices that grow up. And then we also have things that we could become aware of.
Yeah, that we received.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, why else? One more.
Okay. We've been talking about this a lot. This is a little weird, and maybe a new one.
Yeah.
But boy, technology.
Yeah. I'm calling this one "The Robots Are Lying,"
which I love. That's great.
Yeah, we've been talking about this a lot. The robots are lying to us.
They are.
Right, and I don't want to sound like.
Oh, you're going to sound like get off my lawn. Hashtag
I don't
get off my lawn.
I don't want to be get off my lawn guy.
Throw your phone in the river, get a flip phone.
No, I'm not saying that. But I do think we have to sort of like dig this up, because
no, we just need to own it.
I think we need to own it. Okay, so I've got my smartphone next to me.
Always.
My precious. My
precious.
Yeah. And I think we've had these things now for more than 10 years. And by we, I mean, like most of us have had these for more than 10 years.
Some sort of smart device.
Yeah. And if you are in your 20s and 30s in particular, you got these kinds of phones and this kind of technology with these sorts of apps. You got them at a really important moment of your own formation, like in terms of personal development. And the robots lie to us. And I think one of the main reasons, or one of the main ways they lie to us, is in the area of comparison, right?
Right.
Like most of the apps that we run that we're really addicted to, they have a social media feature to them.
Right. And none of these things we're saying this isn't new news
No.
or new knowledge. And we're
No.
not the first ones to say this.
No.
But I do think it's important to link it to this stage of life, that we are at a really, we're talking about a really important stage of life when your margins are already thin.
Yes.
And you're already, in some ways, struggling just with doing life.
Yeah.
Life's getting real. And then you throw on top of that the deep pit of comparison that is inside of all of these social media applications. And it can be a little overwhelming, and it can actually cause you to become paralyzed because you're constantly looking at other people, looking at other things, and comparing your life to someone else's life. So our lives are already a little bit hard at this point.
Yeah.
And now you're taking something and you're comparing your life, which you know the good, the bad, and the ugly, to someone else's high points that they're
Only
posting.
their high points.
Only their high points. And suddenly there's another layer of stress built into your life.
Yeah. And I think this is really subtle. I think this is really subharmonic. But this comparison thing, and I think the comparison thing, it's always at work, especially with the way we live our lives now. But I think it works two ways. So on the one hand, we're looking at other people's highly curated lives. While we feel the lack of margin, and we have become aware maybe that some of our baby cobras have become mama cobras,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we feel inadequate, and then all of a sudden we're living in this jungle of comparison.
Yeah. And we can't see everyone else's cobras in their own lives. So we can't see everyone else's low points. We only see their high points. So it reinforces all of that insecurity.
And then, so that'd be one way.
Right.
But on the other side of this ball, I also see not only are other people putting forward highly curated forms of their lives.
Oh, man, we have to play. We got to play the game.
But we do the same, right?
We do the same. Yeah.
So what ends up happening is when you look at my Instagram, and if you want to go to my Instagram, you can. It's not private. You can look at all my photos.
Oh, you silver fox.
That's right. But if you go to my Instagram, one of the things you're going to find is that I've highly curated my life.
Right.
Right?
I mean, yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I don't put pictures of myself up when I have a stomach virus. You know?
Thank God.
I don't put up pictures of myself when I've really been a bozo, or when I have like allergy eyes or something. You know, I don't do that. And so I see this thing going two ways. Like everyone else is putting up their highlights. I'm comparing. And then all of a sudden I begin to play that game, and it forces me to live into a false self.
Right. And so when you're in this mid-30s time of life, when you need
to be truer,
when you've got to be true to make things work, suddenly you feel like you got to be something else.
And I think that happens at not just 30s.
No, it's everything.
It's everyone.
Goodness,
I'm seeing this as like an amplifier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a mom. And let me tell you, mommy blogs are no joke.
Yeah, it can be brutal, right?
Oh man, it's rough. And if any of you are in any forums or chat type things on Facebook or whatever, those things are rough. Like you can't do anything right.
No.
You'll be ripped apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are people who don't know you and don't know your life.
Furthermore, I just sort of think, just to sort of piggyback on what you said there, wouldn't it just be better for all of us, if we're going to take any parenting advice at all, Shouldn't we just take parenting advice from people who have actual grown children who have turned out okay?
No, I think we should. I think we should make it our status update on Facebook. My child is doing this thing. Does anyone know what I should do? And you should listen to the maybe 16-year-old or the 19-year-old or,
No,
someone who has no experience.
It's an epidemic.
Oh. Okay, so
Comparison. Yes, there we go. It's one of the ways that the robots lie to us.
Sure.
They lie to us with comparison. The second way that I wrote down that the robots lie to us is with controversy.
Oh, yes.
The internet runs on controversy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Again, there's two things that I sort of have in my mind here. One is, for whatever reason, if you want to have like a platform on the internet, and there's exceptions to this, but if you want to have a platform on the internet, one of the best ways to have a platform is to be controversial. And people are learning this osmotically. And so this again goes to that idea of formation. And some of us want to be significant. And one of the best ways to be significant, in addition to curating our life to look great, is also to be controversial.
Right. And the internet and all of these apps and all of these programs are, I don't know, written, formed, coded in a way that...
No, exactly, the algorithm.
that pushes controversy to the top.
Yeah.
And it increases our likelihood to see things that are
that push our
really
buttons.
extreme.
And that push our buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've learned in the last couple of years about Twitter and about Facebook in particular, is that the algorithms that run those platforms are fine-tuned for controversy.
Mm-hmm.
And so because those platforms want to keep us on the app and keep our attention, they've realized one of the best ways to do that is through basically just getting people to fight.
Right. And so here we are trying to live our lives, and
What
we're
little
in
bit
the
of energy.
trenches, and we have a little energy, and we're spending it all choosing sides
Yes.
and being against people that we didn't even know 5 minutes ago we were against.
Not only that, we're saying things sometimes about people or to people on the internet that we would never say to their face.
Right. So Adam and I are experiencing that in our own town right now.
Yeah.
So there's been a bit of controversy. There's been an event, and people are posting
The worst stuff.
just terrible things about people in our community on Facebook. But let me tell you, we live in a really small town, and we are like, these people are going to see each other at our grocery store,
And they would never say those things
and
to
they'll smile and wave.
Yeah.
But something is coming out online that is forming a part of them that's creating divide and controversy and extremism that is super unhealthy.
Yeah. And if you're wondering, like, why have we taken the conversation this direction? Well, the reason I wanted to talk about it in this way is because I've been asking myself, and I've been asking Heather, what is the net result of living with these devices, this technology, and these apps for 10 years?
Right.
What does that do to our soul?
Yeah, because
Does it make me more able to handle or less able to handle life?
it does something, because you and I both are on our phones every day.
Yes.
You can't do something every day without it affecting you.
Yeah.
So how is it affecting us? I think it's an important question.
I think it is too. And I'm not wanting to draw maybe the straightest line, but I think it's connected.
I mean, I don't know the answer, but again, this podcast is more about awareness and becoming awake to a reality than necessarily prescriptive answers.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we become aware that these devices, smartphones, the internet, all of this are pulling out or maybe injecting into something in our personalities about controversy and comparison that maybe might not have been there otherwise.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm very aware of the fact that you're probably listening to this podcast on your iPhone. Right?
Inception.
Yeah. But there's something there, and it's forming our souls. Okay, one more thing about the robots are lying. And we've already sort of hinted at it, but the apps that we most love, they're actually created to hold our attention.
It's like the nicotine and tobacco.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so there's something about this phase of life that we're getting into that some of us are experiencing, that in the very moment where you need margin and you don't have any, oftentimes the little bit of margin that we had is being absorbed by things that may or may not be forming us to even be able to handle the little margin that we have.
Right. And I don't think this is a new thing. Like, I
No.
do think that people, when they're pressed and they have no time, that there's a piece of you that wants to escape. And there's always been a way to escape.
And I actually don't think all escapism is bad.
No, you got it. Yeah. So maybe it's a recliner and the TV in the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
But now it's definitely phones. But there's this other layer of the algorithms and the apps. There's this other layer that's actively working.
Yes. Well, I'll go ahead and I can confess.
Man, this is like really confessional time. Look
That's
at
right.
you.
I can confess. I was listening to a podcast the other day where I was listening to a podcast on my phone the other day where some guys were having a conversation and they made one another get their phones out and look at screen time. And so I looked at screen time and it's like, it's average screen time, right? And so I looked at mine and it was horrible.
Yikes. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it's 3.5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. That's terrible.
It's like a really long superhero movie.
And as soon as I saw it, I immediately wanted to, superhero movies.
That was for you.
Yeah. I don't like superhero movies. Anyway, but as soon as I saw that number, I instantly wanted to, I was doing the sort of the rationalization game, right?
Oh, I was doing some marketing. I was
I'm
working
working.
on, I was
I'm working.
reaching out as pastoring some people.
Yeah, I was reaching out to my church. I was working on stuff for Vineyard Worship. I was calling people,
I think you were shopping for boots,
I could have been.
probably.
I have a thing for boots.
Yeah, online boot shopping. It's a thing.
It is a thing. But it's funny.
Right.
You look at the number and you're like, wow, I don't have a lot of time. I do have a lot of kids. I do have a ton of responsibility. And then there's this flipping phone over here that's drawing me in.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you saying throw our phones away?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that I'm not sure what I'm saying right now. I'm just saying that I know about it.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Right.
And it's important to just own it.
Yeah. And I'm also saying that maybe some of how I feel in my low moments, okay, I'm 41. Maybe some of how I feel right now in my low moments, maybe some of it is some of the stuff we've been talking about.
It's worth consideration.
Yeah. Okay, so we've sort of identified the problem
Right.
a little bit. What are some things that we could do to maybe practically move our life through these stages in a healthy way?
Well, I think the number one thing we can do is to become aware that this is even a thing. Like, I think that's the point of this podcast, is to highlight this stage of life and say, hey, guys, this is a thing. Like, life gets really hard in your 30s, and you need to realize that that's coming. Because honestly, some of it was a bit of a shock to me. I'm not going to lie.
It was a total shock to me. I mean, I had a fairly significant spiritual crisis in my 30s that I've talked about, not a little bit. I've talked about quite a bit.
Right.
And I don't mind talking about it. But I had 2 years where I really struggled in my faith.
Yeah. And I feel like what we've come to find out after talking to lots of people in our church is that's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen to you.
Or that it has to.
Absolutely not. But I found out that when I was sort of working through some of my stuff, I thought I was the only one. And so I didn't tell anyone for over a year. And then I began to open up and share with a few people because I'd become so miserable.
Yeah.
And then in the sharing, basically what was reflected back to me was, this is kind of normal.
Yeah. And so if we can become aware and acknowledge that life is going to get hard, like that our margins are going to get smaller, and that there are forces working against us to steal what little margins we have, and that our choices are coming home to roost. And also, we forgot to mention this one, but as a woman, I would like to say, even our physical bodies are not what they used to be, as far as we don't bounce back quite as easy. Like we start getting older, and late nights, you can't stay up quite as late. You can't recover quite as quickly. Like, if you know.
So there's spiritual components here.
Yeah.
There's emotional components. There's even physical components.
There is.
And so just what we're kind of hoping for is to draw some awareness here.
Yeah.
So that people can give themselves some grace, right?
Yeah. So if we could just acknowledge, wake up, become aware, and own it.
Yeah.
That, we're coming up on this point of life where things are going to get hard in a new way. They're going to get more difficult in a new way.
Yeah.
Then that would be super helpful. And I feel like if we can do that, then we can start taking some steps to prepare to navigate through this phase of life with grace and with maybe not blowing our lives up.
Okay, so how can we take some steps to navigate
Okay, well, we've talked about a few things, but I think
beyond just becoming aware?
right, we got to become aware. But after that, you can start preparing and you can start like doing some things. And even if you're in the thralls of this right now, or even if you've passed through it, like these things are still helpful. The first thing I think we can do is we can connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got to have some friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't go it alone. It's super important. And I'm not talking about just surfacey friends. And I'm not even talking about friends that you only call when everything gets real hard.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about friends who maybe that you share your anxieties with,
Yeah.
that maybe you share your struggles with, you share your heart with, you even share your dreams with, and you can like kind of talk to them about the things you're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that Dr. Phil enough?
I think it's great. And I also want to say that it's so important to have friends. And I've noticed that people sometimes don't invest in their friendships at a certain point. You know, they let life take it or whatever. Or I've been meeting more and more people who, you know, don't have a friend that they feel like they could have this conversation with or begin to share their difficulties or their vulnerabilities with. And so maybe the first step beyond awareness is to begin to carve out some moments to actually have friends, you know?
Yeah. So, which means that you are looking at your life, you're assessing your margins, and you are weighing friendship as something that is important enough to fit in some of that time that is so what's that word?
Sparse.
Sparse.
Yeah.
So I said sparse.
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 That's right.
Your free time is very sparse.
Yeah. No, we have to connect
so friendship's important enough to say, you know what, I have a free night on Thursday evening, and it is important enough to have a friend that I'm going to take that time and sit and talk to a friend.
Yeah. And so sometimes even maybe leaving the spouse and the kids behind to go have a friend, that'd be a great use of time.
Yeah. And why is friendship so important? I think it's because all of these things that we go through at this stage of life, they're all pulling us away from people, and we need that connection with people.
Yeah. What are some other ways we can connect with people?
Friends are great. You need friends, but you also need some people who are a little further down the road than you.
Yeah.
So you need maybe a pastor.
Yeah.
You need a mentor.
Yeah.
You need a counselor, a spiritual director. Those friends are great, but then sometimes you need to talk to someone who is an expert.
Yeah.
No,
I think that's great. I know you and I have both over the last 2 years acquired a spiritual director.
Right.
And I think it's been ridiculous.
It's been great. I will say that I saw a huge change in you.
Yeah.
When you got a spiritual director. I could tell the days that you had met with him because you would come home and you would just see.
And I hadn't told you.
No, because full disclosure, we tend to be fairly independent in our
That's right.
scheduling.
That's right.
I never know what you're doing.
That's right.
But so you would come home and I'd be like doing whatever, fixing dinner or hanging out. And you were just like lighter
Yeah.
because you tend to be a serious person.
Yeah.
And intense. I
Yeah.
think that even
think
comes across on the podcast.
I think that's common knowledge.
But I saw these days you would come home and just literally be lighter and more full of joy.
Yeah.
And I would be like, what'd you do today? You'd be like, oh, I talked to my spiritual director. And that happened multiple times. And I was like, wait a minute. And sure enough, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And one of the things I've noticed in spiritual direction, I think one of the best things I've noticed in spiritual direction is that it has become a space where I'm oftentimes saying things for the first time. So if there's something in my life I need to own, or if there's something that's kind of scary in my life that I need to talk about, maybe even things I haven't talked to you about yet, or maybe something big that I've been thinking about, but I haven't prayed to God about it, or I haven't shared it with a friend, any of my friends. I've noticed that spiritual direction is a safe place for me to try something out because it's one of these rare environments where there's zero judgment.
Right. And you're an external processor.
I am. I can't even understand if I like an idea or not without sharing it with some people.
And some ideas you don't feel comfortable sharing with just anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And probably for good reason.
or even like maybe not even an idea, but some just some parts of my life I don't, it's like I don't know where to even start.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a great place.
Yeah, yeah.
So, becoming aware of things, but then also connecting with friends, connecting with people, like connecting with friends. And then for us, connecting with the spiritual director has been amazing.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
And I know for some, a counselor who can help you navigate like trauma
or a pastor.
Things that have come up and bubbled up in your life from your childhood.
Yes.
A pastor, super important.
Yeah, because a pastor can help you maybe reconsider your own spiritual formation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Pastor is a person who's talked to probably lots of people like you.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Everybody we end up talking to who's like, feels like they're the only one going through something. Not that you want to ever belittle someone's pain.
Of course not.
But you also want to assure them that, dude, like 10 other people are going through this right now.
Yeah.
Which I think is comforting.
It is actually comforting. It is for me anyway, because there's something about pain or difficulty that often feels isolating because we feel like, oh, I'm the only one.
Well, and I'll say this, short detour, but after my first baby, I experienced postpartum depression, but I didn't know that's what it was.
Well, we had never even heard of it.
No, I just thought I was going crazy.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really, really dark time. And had I even had one friend or someone to say, oh, no, that's kind of a thing. Like, that's normal.
You just had a baby. Your hormones are going bananas.
But we were super young.
Yeah.
Oh, so young.
We were married. I was married.
Idiots.
I was married. We were married at 21 and Heather was 19.
Yeah.
And then first baby came at 23 and 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we were young. None of our friends had babies yet. And I thought I was losing my mind. I thought it was awful. And if I had known even one other person who could say, oh, no, I went through that too, I think it would have saved a lot of heartache.
It would have. And the cool thing I like about that story that you just told is that it just sort of highlights everything that we said a moment ago. It's about becoming aware, but then connecting with other people and then finding out that you're not alone.
Well, and becoming aware of postpartum depression actually wouldn't have made it go away.
No.
It just would have made me not feel like I was going crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you can name something, it feels smaller.
Yeah, if I just knew what it was, then I could take a course of action to treat it.
It's not the smoke monster from Lost, you know?
Oh, Lost. I haven't thought about that forever.
I know. When you were talking about it, I got a picture of the smoke monster.
That's really... Wait, you thought about me and you thought of the smoke monster?
I just thought about how we didn't know what it was, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was a little detour, but...
I think it's important. Okay, so we need to be able to name things, become aware, become awake. We need to connect our life to people.
Yeah.
We can't live in isolation when we're becoming more pressed.
No, we can't. I mean,
And-
we can, but it's not healthy.
It won't work. Yeah.
No.
So we need to connect with people. And then what else do we need to do?
Well, we need to connect with God.
Yes.
We're pastors.
We're pastors.
We have to put this in here, right?
Yeah, it's illegal if we don't.
Oh, it's actually really important.
No, it is important. Yeah, we have to reconnect with God. And sometimes that means rediscovering how to connect with God.
Right. And can I just say it's really difficult to connect with God when you're thinking about 14 other things and when you are stressed to the max and trying to do multitasking like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what do you do?
Connecting with God isn't just this mental exercise.
No.
It actually has physical ramifications in our life.
Well, and I think another word for that is just formation, right? Yeah. So to connect with God means I have to put aside some time.
Yeah.
I have to make a space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have to change my heart for a moment, turn it outward to God again. And so, yeah, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. And so really what we're saying is like, this phase of life is going to happen. It's going to happen. And it can be really great or really not great.
Yeah.
And in order to navigate it in a healthy way, you may have to change the way your life looks. Because to connect with friends and to connect with God, it actually changes the pattern of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say one more thing about connecting with God. The way I connected with God when I was in high school is similar but different now that I'm in my early 40s and as I was coming through my 30s.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, like it really changed.
Well, I remember a moment when I guess it was after our second baby, and the kids were down for a nap.
Yeah.
And I was scrubbing the kitchen floor, and I guess it was from church. I don't know. There was a scripture in my mind, and I was just kind of mulling over that one small piece of scripture in my mind, and I felt a connection with the Lord. And yes, I was multitasking. I know I just said that a moment ago, but I was scrubbing the floor and meditating on this piece of scripture and felt super connected to God. And then I was like, wait a minute, this has never happened before. Because up to that point, it had been like I had had time to sit and pray and read long pieces of whatever.
Yeah.
And now the kids are asleep. I'm scrubbing the floor and I'm connecting with God in this way.
Yeah.
And it was a moment where I remember a switch being flipped and being like, oh, well, this can look a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think giving ourselves permission to modify how we connect with God,
Yeah. It can look different in each season of life.
or to even change some things, to make some radical moves. For instance, in my mid 30s, that's when I started going to Gethsemane, which is this Catholic monastery a few miles away from here. It's where Thomas Merton did his writing. And I started going and doing silent retreats once a year over there for 2 or 3 days at a time, which is sort of extreme.
It's extreme,
But I needed it.
but it's the extreme opposite of your life.
It
It's
is.
stillness and silence.
Yeah. And I needed it. And that was not how I connected with God in my teens or my 20s. But in my 30s, what I really needed was, I didn't need another worship CD. What I really needed was space, and I needed quiet. Yeah. And so I think giving ourselves permission to connect with God in new ways, and maybe even some permission to explore, and if the things that we used to do, we don't have time for it, or if it just isn't the thing anymore, I think it's okay.
Yeah, there's no stress there. There's no condemnation there.
That's right. So what are we saying? We're saying be awake,
Be awake.
connect with people, connect with God.
Yep.
Hey, this was really good.
This has been fun.
You did real good.
Can I just say that I'm a huge fan and I listen to all of your episodes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell me?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Hey, we hope this was helpful. We hope this was something that allows you to maybe name the moment you're in, or to give you a bit of an idea of what may be coming for you, and not in a negative sense, but just like, wow, this is sort of the ramifications for getting a full life. Or maybe you're in your 40s and 50s and you've wondered for years, what the heck happened to me, you know, back then. So maybe this can bring some clarity. Hope this is helpful. And
let's do something a little different.
Okay.
We talked about, if you have some thoughts on this, if you have some experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you shoot us a little message?
You can shoot us a message on our Instagram.
Yeah.
Or you can just comment on the Ferment post that'll show up on Instagram or Facebook. We'd love to hear your stories, things that you've done, things that have worked, ways that you've connected with God and people as you've gone through life and as your life is filled up, and ways that you've stayed a whole person rather than a pressed down, fragmented, frazzled person.
Yeah.
All right. High five, babe.
High five.
Peace, everybody.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple of ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at The Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.